is it possible for unregulated capitalism, the type of capitalism that libertarians and by and large Republicans are in favor of, where government has a very limited role in regulating capitalism and basically the capitalists run the show? Is it possible to have a functioning democratic society, small d democratic society, that produces one of the, or arguably all of the criteria that Thomas Jefferson defined in the Declaration of Independence: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? Is it possible to produce that for the majority of people in a capitalist society, with unregulated capitalism? Now, I'm not a total opponent of capitalism. I am an opponent of laissez-faire capitalism, of unregulated capitalism, of capitalism where the capitalists make the rules and the rest of us get stuck with the rules. Let's keep in mind, there are probably only a few tens of thousands, maybe 100,000, but not a lot, of actual capitalists in the United States. Capitalists are people who earn their living with capital. Laborers are people who earn their living by their work. And there's a very significant difference between the two. Capitalists earn their living using their money, investing their money, sitting around the pool, waiting for the dividend check to arrive. Sometimes more actively using their money, the way Mitt Romney did. Buy a company, lay off the workers, move the factory to China, jack up the profits, take the money. Hey, that's what capitalists do. So is it possible for capitalism in a relatively unregulated fashion, as we have by and large in the United States right now, and as we had in the United States in the 1920s, and we did not have in the United States from the 1930s until arguably the late 1980s. Instead, during that period of time, we had heavily regulated capitalism. You get all these Republicans and these billionaires and the shills for the billionaires and the shills for the big corporations running around going, like their hair on fire. Oh my God, the regulations, it's killing America. All these small businesses have vanished because of regulations. I'm sorry, I run a small business and I haven't noticed any regulations. Oh, it's the taxes. They're killing. Their small businesses in America generally don't pay taxes. I mean, they certainly contribute to economic activity. They pay their employees. They split the FICA with them. There is money that goes to the federal government, but the taxes are paid by companies like Apple that make hundreds of, or ExxonMobil that make hundreds of millions, tens of billions of dollars in profits, and particularly now are trying to shelter those by keeping them offshore in the hopes that the day will come when there's a Republican president and a Republican Congress, and they'll say, gee, let's just declare a holiday, a moratorium. All these big companies, Apple's got $100 billion sitting offshore. They can bring that home, and instead of paying the maximum 40% corporate income tax, what with deductions and everything else would probably work out between 20 and 25%, they can bring it home for 3% or for free. This is what they're all working on right now, right? This repatriation. Bring home the money. Right. Sounds nice. It's a great slogan. It makes a great bumper sticker, which is what the Republican Party is all about. If you can reduce it to a bumper sticker and get people to say it and repeat it, and they think they know what they're talking about and they don't, then that's a Republican issue. So the question, can you have a well-educated, safe, secure, healthy, happy populace and have unregulated capitalism? Jefferson's 3 criteria: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. How can you have life if you are sick and you don't have access to health care because you can't afford it? So, we are the only country in the world that does not have, the only developed country in the world that does not have a national health care system of some form or shape. I mean, the Switzerland doesn't have a national health care system. It's run by the government, but the government does require everybody in Switzerland to buy health insurance, and they have to buy it from a nonprofit organization, so it doesn't cost very much. But everybody is insured in Switzerland, have to be. Other countries, England, they have the National Health Service in England. It's actually owned by the government, by the people. You have other countries that have single-payer healthcare systems, like most of the Scandinavian countries, where the government doesn't own the clinics or employ the doctors, but they pay the bills. But how do you have life in the United States? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, Declaration of Independence. How do you have life if you're sick and you can't afford to go to the doctor? You don't. So we have not yet, Obamacare has taken us a step forward, but we have not yet met the founding ideals of this country. So that's life. Liberty is the second one. How can you have liberty in a society run by oligarchs and plutocrats? Now, we had a guest on in the last hour who is, representing an organization that's funded in part by oligarchs and plutocrats, saying, we're a freedom agenda. People should be free to make their own choices. Right. So you're sick and you can't afford to go to the doctor. You're hungry and you can't afford to buy food. You want to work, but there's no jobs because the capitalists moved all the jobs to Vietnam and China and Honduras and whatever. Are you free? Do you have liberty? I mean, we know that for the roughly half of Americans who live at or below the poverty level, they're not, their right to life is significantly impaired. Tens of thousands of them die unnecessarily every year. What about their right to liberty? Franklin Roosevelt said, a necessitous man, in other words, somebody who doesn't have their basic necessary needs met, a necessitous man is not a free man. You are free when you have a job that pays enough money that you can have a home and you can raise your kids and you can take a vacation and you can and your debt and you can live debt free. That's freedom. That's liberty. Now, the libertarians and the right wingers and the Republicans would want you to think that liberty and freedom means something else. I mean, they throw out this abstraction. We are a liberty agenda, a freedom agenda. And what does that mean? Well, it means that the Koch brothers can pollute the rivers all they want with their paper factories for Georgia Pacific, or that they can pollute the air all they want with Koch Industries, oil refineries, or they can throw as much carbon in the atmosphere as they want with all the tar sands that they own up in Alberta in Canada, and then ship it down to the Gulf Coast where they can refine it in their refineries and then sell it to China. That's freedom. But what about my freedom to live in a planet that isn't melting down as a consequence of their freedom? Well, that's not the kind of freedom Republicans and libertarians are talking about. So there's life, liberty, and then happiness. How can you be happy if you're hungry? How can you be happy if you're homeless? How can we have debunked the idea that money buys happiness. But there actually is a kernel of truth to it. The first $30,000 to $50,000, or really $20,000 to $50,000 that a person earns every year, depending on where they live, makes a huge difference in the quality of their happiness. After that, you make $100, $200, $300, $400. It doesn't seem to have much effect. In fact, a lot of money can make people miserable.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
But the simple fact is, because of unregulated capitalism and because the Supreme Court has turned our media over to these guys, there's a lot of Americans who don't even have the right to happiness.